I never thought babysitting could turn into something out of a nightmare until the night I met Lucas. The Carter's house was pristine, almost too perfect. Glass walls and modern decor made the place feel cold rather than welcoming. Lucas was their 7-year-old son, quiet, polite, but with eyes that seemed older than his age. When Mrs. Carter left, promising to return by midnight, I was alone with him in that huge house. At first, everything was normal. He tucked himself in early, then whispered about someone who always showed up when the parents left. I laughed it off, but there was a chill in his voice I couldn't ignore. Around 9, the doorbell rang. A man named Victor appeared on the monitor. He wore a dark suit and had those terrible red eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. His face was scarred, twisted, and his wild white hair gave him a haunted look. He said he was family, but something about him didn't sit right. Mrs. Carter's voice on the phone sounded tight when she assured me it was fine. Victor entered, brushing past me, and the air shifted. Minutes crawled by as he wandered the study. I tried to focus on the textbook, but the tension was suffocating. His eyes never left me, sharp and unforgiving. Then he smiled that sick grin, revealing unnaturally sharp teeth. The smile didn't reach those eyes. They held something dangerous, something beyond human. I told him to leave, but his voice was cold. He offered money, too much for a babysitter's job. Panic rose inside me. I reached for my phone, but before I could call, Victor grabbed my wrist. His grip was strong, relentless. I struggled, heart pounding in my ears. Then I saw Ethan's empty room. The boy was gone. Victor's laughter echoed as I chased shadows through the house, each creak twisting into dread. I found Ethan hiding, eyes wide with fear, whispering about the man who always came when the parents left. I grabbed the phone again, dialing 911, hoping for a lifeline. Victor burst into the room, his face inches from mine, wild and terrifying. The lights flickered, and I felt the walls closing in. Suddenly, a voice called out. Mark, the neighbor, had heard the commotion. He rushed in, bold and steady, facing Victor without hesitation. The darkness seemed to recoil as Mark stood between us, calm and strong. Victor hissed but backed away, shadows melting into the corners. The police arrived moments later. Victor was taken away, but the fear stayed with me long after. Ethan whispered that he would never forget what happened that night. I still see those red eyes in my dreams, watching from the dark. Maybe it was just a nightmare. I tried to move on. For weeks, I avoided mirrors, turned my phone off at night, and stayed with friends just to feel normal again. But no matter where I went, something followed. It started with the sound, faint at first. A low hum, like an old radio caught between stations. It came from the corners of rooms, from vents, even through pillows. I thought I was imagining it, until I caught Ethan humming the same tune one morning on a FaceTime call. He didn't remember learning it. Then came the shadows. They stretched in the wrong direction, curved in ways that didn't make sense. Sometimes I'd walk past a glass window and see a flicker of white curls disappearing behind me. I kept telling myself it was stress, sleep deprivation. But deep down, I knew Victor wasn't gone. One night I stayed late at the library, hoping the noise of other people would drown it out. Mark called, checking in. He was the only one who truly believed me, who didn't try to explain everything away. He said he'd been doing research, that Victor wasn't just some creep, he was older, inhuman. I didn't want to hear it, but part of me needed answers. Mark mentioned an old case, buried in newspaper archives, 1967, a man named V. Keller was institutionalized for entering homes uninvited, claiming to be a child's uncle. Same scarred face, same white hair, same red eyes, but it couldn't be the same man. That was decades ago. That night, I stayed at Mark's place. He lived alone, 2 blocks from me. Small house, lined with books and plants, safe, or so I thought. I woke around 2 a.m., throat dry. I went to the kitchen and stopped cold. There were footprints on the floor, wet, like someone had walked through rain, but it hadn't rained in days. I followed them. They led down the hall, past the guest room, into the basement. I stood at the top of the stairs, the hum louder now. The basement door creaked open by itself. Mark stepped out from behind it, pale, eyes wide. He whispered, "He's back." We both heard the sound, not footsteps, not breathing, something slower, heavier, like bones dragging against wood. We backed into the living room, but the lights began to flicker, one by one. Then the fireplace flared up, casting long shadows across the walls. and he was there, Victor. Not just a man, but something else. Something carved from darkness and stitched into human form. His tongue slithered out, long and purple, eyes glowing like dying stars. His grin spread unnaturally wide, cracking the corners of his mouth. Mark grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace, but Victor didn't flinch. He whispered something I couldn't understand. The words felt sharp, like thorns crawling into my ears. My vision blurred. I staggered back. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, Victor froze. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something behind him. A breeze moved through the room, though all the windows were closed. In the middle of the hallway, a figure stood. Tall, lean, face hidden under a dark hood. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them. Focused, steady. He raised his hand, and the hum stopped. The light steadied. Victor recoiled, snarling, then vanished into smoke. The hooded man said nothing. He looked at Mark, then at me, before turning toward the front door. I stepped forward, heart racing. "Who are you?" He paused. "Just someone who remembers what Victor used to be." And then he was gone. After that night, things calmed, for a while. The humming stopped. No more red eyes in the dark. Ethan slept through the night again. But I know Victor isn't truly gone. He waits, somewhere just out of reach, waiting for a moment of weakness, waiting for a door left unlocked or a window left open. And sometimes, when the wind moves strangely or a reflection lingers longer than it should, I feel that cold air brush against my skin. And I remember, babysitting was never just a job. It was an invitation. I hadn't heard from Mark in weeks. After that night, he pulled away, didn't answer texts, skipped work. I told myself he needed space, that maybe what we saw had gotten to him more than I realized. Then a letter came. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in blue ink. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Victor standing outside a house I didn't recognize, his red eyes staring into the lens. Scribbled beneath, "He remembers you." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I drove to Mark's place. His windows were dark, mail piled up by the door. I knocked. No answer. The air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. I pushed open the gate. The backyard light was on, flickering like it couldn't decide if it should go out or burn brighter. Inside, everything looked untouched. Nothing broken, nothing stolen. But I noticed the small things. A glass of water, half full. A chair pulled out from the table. The faint scent of something sweet and metallic. I turned to leave but paused at the hallway mirror. My reflection wasn't alone. Behind me stood a woman, late 20s maybe. Auburn hair, pale skin, sharp features softened by wide, curious eyes. She looked frightened but calm. I spun around but the hallway was empty. Then her voice came, soft and unsure. "I'm Delia. You saw him too, didn't you?" She wasn't real, or at least not entirely. But she was there somehow. I didn't ask how. She said she knew Victor, had known him long before me. Her brother vanished when they were kids, and every few years someone else would see those same red eyes. Delia reached out, her hand brushing mine, cold and light. She said Victor fed on fear. He was drawn to people who remembered him. People like Mark, people like me. That night I stayed at a hotel across town. No windows, no mirrors. Still, I dreamt of a staircase. Endless and narrow, lit by candles that bent without wind. Victor was waiting at the bottom, smiling, and behind him, Mark stood motionless, eyes empty. I woke up sweating, the room cold, my breath visible. On the bedside table sat another photo. This time it was me, sleeping. The caption read, "He wants you home." I called Mia, a friend from college. She studied folklore, always fascinated by what she called thin places, spots where reality frays and something older seeps through. She listened quietly, then told me to meet her in person. Said this wasn't the kind of thing you handled over the phone. When I arrived, Mia looked different. Serious, tense. She flipped through pages of old books, symbols, sketches. She pointed to one, the Red Watcher. A presence bound to a family line, never fully gone, just waiting. She looked at me hard. "You're not the first. We found a link. Delia's family once owned the land where the Carters now lived. Victor had been seen before in the same area, always around children. Mia believed Delia was trapped, between here and somewhere else. A ghost, maybe, or something trying not to be forgotten. That night I returned to the Carter house. I needed to see Lucas, needed to know if he was safe. Mrs. Carter greeted me with a smile too wide, her eyes too still. Lucas peeked from behind her, quiet as always. We played a board game, pretending nothing was wrong. but his hands trembled when he rolled the dice. I asked if he'd seen Victor. He nodded once. He's been in my dreams again. But this time he talks about you. I tucked him in, turned off the lights. As I walked down the hallway, every bulb behind me flickered out, one by one. In the living room, a figure waited by the fireplace. Not Victor. Delia. She looked brighter this time, more solid. She said there was one way to end this. I had to return to the place it started, the old house. The foundation still stood beneath the Carter home, beneath the floorboards of the study. I asked her why me, because you remember. I crawled under the desk, pulled up the rug. The wooden planks felt wrong. I pried one up. Beneath it, stone stairs spiraled down into a darkness that hummed low and steady. I looked back once, then descended. It's strange, what fear lets you do, how silence can roar. I walked deeper, shadows pulsing like they breathed. At the bottom, I found a door. The door wasn't locked, it opened with a breath, groaning against stone. Cold air spilled out, dry and stale, like it hadn't been touched in years. I stepped through, expecting shadows, but instead I found a room lit by a soft amber glow. The floor was smooth, worn by footsteps that hadn't walked in a long time. Symbols lined the walls, carved deep and deliberate. Some I recognized from Mia's books, others felt older, too old. Delia stood near the center, silent, watching something I couldn't see. Then I noticed him. Victor, but not like before. He looked younger, dressed in something simple, standing still, eyes wide. No red, no scars, just a boy, staring into the light above him. Delia said he wasn't always what he is now, that something happened here. This was the beginning. A voice echoed behind me, soft, measured. I turned to find a woman. She introduced herself as Leah, said she was the last to try what I was doing, said most don't come back. She wasn't a ghost, not exactly. I could hear her breath, but there was something about the way she never blinked. She said Victor was never meant to be what he became, that this place had twisted him, fed on his fear until he turned into something else, something that now fed on others. I asked how to end it. She just said, remember what fear takes, and give it nothing. The air thickened, the light dimmed. Delia backed away, her form flickering. Victor began to move, slow, mechanical. His face changed, the scars returned, the eyes bled back into red. He smiled, but it wasn't his own. The room shook. A low hum, deep in the stone, began to rise. I stepped toward him, heart hammering. My hands trembled, but I kept walking. Victor stopped, watching. I remembered Lucas, his eyes, the fear in them. That's what it wanted. Not him, not me. The fear. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and let go. Let go of the terror that clung to me since that first night. I saw Mark's face, Mia's worry, Delia's sorrow. I held it all, then set it down in my mind, like placing a stone on the ground. The humming stopped. Victor's smile faded. His eyes flickered, the room dimmed, then silence. He turned, looking toward Delia. For the first time, his face softened. She reached out, her hand brushing his shoulder. Light poured through the carvings in the wall. The air shifted, warm, still. Leah stepped beside me. It's done. I blinked, and they were gone. The room was empty, just stone, dust, and quiet. I climbed back up, each step heavier than the last. The house above was still. Lucas slept peacefully. Mrs. Carter sat at the table, sipping tea, eyes distant like waking from a dream. I walked outside into the night. The sky looked different, clearer. I called Mia, no answer. Her line disconnected. Later that week, I visited the library where she worked. They said she never came back after our last meeting. No records, no trace. I returned to her apartment, empty. The landlord said no one by that name ever lived there. I drove home in silence. That night, I opened my drawer and found another letter. No name, no stamp. Inside, a single photo. Leah, standing in front of the staircase, her eyes calm. Underneath, 3 words. Some doors return. I turned the photo over, blank. But for a moment, just a flicker, I swore I heard footsteps in the hall.
3 true foster care horror street-ories. Late September, near the edge of Red Rock Canyon in Nevada, a cold wind blew through the canyons as dusk settled. Our truck broke down somewhere past the last ranger station. That's when we first saw him standing, just beyond the ridge, dressed in a white suit and matching wide-brimmed hat, unmoving against the setting sun. Camille spotted him first. She was a striking woman, short, platinum hair, pale olive skin, always half hidden under a gray hood. No one knew much about her, just that she joined our trip last minute through a wilderness retreat group online. Leo and I exchanged a glance. We didn't know if he was a lost hiker or something else, but something about the way he just stood there made us uneasy. We set up camp by a dry creek bed. Leo tried to get signal while Ava or friend from med school searched for wood. The light began to vanish. That's when the whispering started. Not around us, in us. Low voices repeating names we hadn't told anyone. Ava screamed when she turned and saw him behind the trees. He was still, smiling, but closer than before. Later that night, Camille wandered too far from camp. We found her sitting by the fire, her eyes wide, whispering about a door in the desert. Her fingers were scratched, like she'd been digging. Then, we noticed the footprints bare, long, and deep circling our tents. Ava froze when she realized her name had been carved into the side of the tree she was sleeping under. The tension twisted tighter. Leo heard someone calling him from beyond the rocks, mimicking my voice. He followed it. We found his bag by the ridge. He never came back. The next evening, Ava refused to eat. She said he was coming again, that he whispered to her in her dreams. That she saw his face under the hat, no eyes. Just a mouth stretched too wide, grinning even when still. That night, I caught her packing silently, trying to run. But she didn't make it 10 feet from the fire before her scream was cut short. Camille and I found her shoe tangled in a thorn bush. No tracks, no blood, just that hat, sitting perfectly upright in the dirt. Now it's just Camille and me, but she isn't speaking anymore, just sits there, staring at the shadows between the rocks. She says he's waiting, that he's almost done choosing. And when I sleep, I hear him too closer now. He says I'm the last one worth playing with. And every morning, that white hat is a little closer to my sleeping bag. 3 days since Ava disappeared. The heat was unbearable, but the cold at night was worse. Somewhere between dusk and silence, he returned standing halfway up the ridge, that pale hat glowing like a lantern in the dark. Camille hadn't spoken in hours. She only moved to trace circles in the dirt with her finger. I tried to keep the fire alive, even though it never stayed lit past midnight. The air shifted strangely after dark, like it breathed against us. We'd started hearing sound-slow humming and the crunch of rocks, but always too far to trace. We found Leo's watch buried beneath the stones this morning, still ticking, still warm. Camille finally looked at me, her voice cracked like dried paper. She said he wanted her to see that she'd followed him the night before. Past the ridge, beyond the cactus grove, where the ground opened up into a strange sinkhole littered with bones, animal and otherwise. She said he didn't walk. He floated just enough to never touch the sand. As she spoke, I noticed bruises blooming around her wrists, like fingers had held her down. Her hood was damp, like she'd been sweating or crying. I didn't ask which. We had no signal, no food left. I suggested we walk east in the morning. She said he wouldn't let us. That night, I woke to find her gone. I followed faint footprints along the ridge trail until I reached the edge of a wide, hollowed plateau. There she was, standing across from him. His body still, arms out, like he was offering something. The moon outlined his form, but never his face. His hat never moved. Camille took a step forward. I called her name. She didn't turn. I called again, louder. He tilted his head, slowly, like a curious bird. The wind dropped. Camille turned then, her eyes wide with fear, and ran toward me. I didn't wait. We sprinted down into the gulch, the wind behind us filled with a deep, rustling laugh. Not loud, but close. Too close. When we reached the camp, our fire pit was gone. Not extinguished. Gone. Just flat ground where it used to be. Camille wouldn't sleep, neither did I. She told me about the girl, the one she saw with him. A beautiful woman, tall, draped in dark green, with skin like old jade. She never spoke, but her eyes glowed in the dark. Camille said the woman followed her back, standing silently behind her the entire walk. But I saw nothing, only shadows moving like waves along the rocks. The next day, we heard someone calling again. This time, it was Ava's voice. calling from inside the canyon. We shouldn't have followed it, but Camille did. What we found was a clearing, dry, still, but Ava's necklace lay in the center, placed on a rock like an offering, and near it, boot prints, not Camille's, not mine, too large, too deep. I turned to speak, but Camille was gone. I found her minutes later, trembling behind a rock, covering her ears. She whispered that he touched her again, that he asked her something she couldn't understand, that he showed her her own face, but it was wrong. Her eyes were black, her mouth missing. She said she tried to scream, but no sound came. The third night was the worst. We stayed in a shallow cave. She refused to lie down. I tried to block the entrance with rocks. Useless. Around midnight, I woke up to her standing, arms lifted like a puppet, her eyes rolled back, whispering in a language I didn't recognize. Then her body collapsed. She gasped when I shook her awake. She sobbed into my shoulder, shaking. Said she saw a house in the desert where the floor moved and the ceiling breathed, and he was there, watching her through every crack in the wall. That was when I saw it, etched into the stone above her head, a handprint with too many fingers. He came again near dawn. I didn't see him arrive. He was just there, on the edge of the cave entrance, watching. Still, I froze. He smiled, but his mouth didn't move. He lifted one hand, palm facing me, fingers stretching slowly outward. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Camille screamed behind me, but the sound echoed, as if it came from far below, like a memory being pulled away. And then he was gone. We haven't spoken since, only walked, eastward hoping for roads, for signs. But the terrain keeps folding in on itself. Yesterday, we passed the same Joshua tree 3 times. Camille's lips are cracked, her eyes glassy. I think she's not all here anymore. Last night, I woke to find her drawing again. This time, the woman in green. Beneath the drawing, she'd written something. Not English. I don't know how she did it. This morning, the hat was waiting outside our tent, resting on the sand, its white surface unmarred, facing us, watching. Camille refuses to move now. She says he wants her to stay, that the woman told her, in dreams, that she's the last one he needs. And now, I see her too, every time I close my eyes, just behind the veil of sleep, a silhouette, breathing, waiting, not dead, not alive. Tomorrow, I'll try to leave on my own. The desert stretched endlessly in front of us, the sky painted with streaks of deep orange. The heat was unbearable, yet the nightfall brought a cold, so bitter it felt like we were being watched by something ancient. That's when he came again, silent as a shadow. But this time, we were ready, or so we thought. I could hear Camille's shallow breath as she stood beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly I thought my bones might snap. We were past the point of denial now. The nightmare was no longer a distant thought, a whisper in the dark. It had become our reality, one we couldn't escape. The villain, that figure in the white suit, emerged at the edge of the sand, as if he had been waiting for us the entire time. His presence wasn't marked by footsteps, nor by any sound at all. He just was. The moonlight cast an eerie glow around him, making his figure appear both too sharp and too soft, like a nightmare halfway through its transition into something real. Camille's voice was barely a whisper. He's here. He wants us. I turned to her, my heart racing. But before I could speak, he stepped forward, not walking, but gliding, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. There was no wind, but his figure swayed, like it was caught in an unseen breeze, as if the very air was part of him. The distant stars overhead flickered, like they were being smothered by the darkness he brought with him. "Leave us alone," I said, my voice shaking. It wasn't a plea, it was more a declaration at last, desperate attempt to break the grip he had over us. He stopped. The smile that appeared on his face was chilling, a curve of lips that didn't seem natural. It wasn't the smile of a man, it was the smile of something that had been pretending to be human for far too long. His eyes still hidden beneath his hat burned, with a light that seemed to pierce right through me. Camille's grip tightened on my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "He'll never leave," she whispered. "He's not here for us. He's here for me." I didn't understand what she meant, but the fear in her eyes told me it wasn't just a passing thought. It was a truth she had known, long before I had. The man in the white suit didn't just want to scare us. He wanted her. He took another step forward, and this time, there was no stopping him. He was close enough now that I could almost see the contours of his face beneath the shadow of his hat. His smile never wavered. "You cannot escape," he said, his voice not a sound, but a vibration in the air. "You've always belonged to me, Camille." I could feel the earth beneath my feet tremble. It wasn't a physical tremor, it was something deeper, something more sinister. A sound, distant but growing closer, echoed across the desert floor like 1,000 whispers calling her name. I looked at Camille, but she wasn't looking at me anymore. Her gaze was fixed on him, almost as if she were under a trance. His hand stretched out, not in a gesture of kindness, but of command. The air around him thickened, swirling like a storm trapped inside a bottle. For a moment, I thought I saw something someone in the distance, moving toward us. But when I blinked, it was gone. Camille stepped forward, slowly, her movements stiff, robotic. She didn't speak, but I could hear her thoughts. They screamed in my mind. "I have to go with him, I have no choice." The villain's hand was now inches from her face. He didn't touch her, but the space between them was filled with a force so heavy, I could feel it pushing against my chest. His smile stretched wider. "You will come," he said, his words more like a command than a request. "You have always been mine. Your soul, your essence. I've claimed it long ago." I grabbed Camille's arm, pulling her back, but it felt like trying to move a mountain. "Camille, fight it!" I shouted, my voice cracking. For a moment, she seemed to snap out of it, her eyes clearing for just a second. But then, the whispers came again. The voice louder, more desperate. "Don't let him take me," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "I can't stop it. I can't fight him." I turned back to face the villain. "Why her?" I demanded. "What do you want with her?" The figure in the white suit tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. "Why does the predator hunt the prey?" he replied cryptically. "Why does the night swallow the day?" I felt the air grow colder, the shadows lengthen, as though the world itself was bending to his will. The ground beneath us cracked open, revealing a deep chasm that seemed to lead into the bowels of the earth itself. From within, a low, guttural growl echoed, followed by a high-pitched scream that made my skin crawl. Without warning, he lunged at Camille, his hand brushing against her cheek. For a split second, I thought I saw her change. Her skin grew paler, her eyes darkened, and for a moment, she didn't seem like herself at all. She looked dead. But then she screamed, a sound so piercing, it cut through the darkness and echoed across the desert. I lunged forward, grabbing her wrist, pulling her back, but she was already slipping away. The villain in the white suit stood motionless, smiling. "It's too late." As I looked into his eyes for the first time, I saw something that made my heart stop deep within those dark pupils. Something was watching us. Something far worse than the man in the white suit. And I knew, at that moment, that this was only the beginning. The moon hung low in the midnight sky, casting a cold, silvery light over the cracked desert floor. The chill of the night air was sharp, biting through every layer of clothing, but the fear in our hearts burned hotter than any flame. We could hear the distant echoes of the wind as it whipped around us, carrying with it a sense of impending doom. We weren't alone. Camille stood frozen beside me, her body tense as if trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the pale glow of the moon, but there was something else in them, something dark, something that wasn't her. The figure in the white suit had already disappeared into the shadows once again, but his presence lingered. I could feel it, the weight of his eyes on us, even when he wasn't physically there. "Why won't he leave us alone?" I muttered to myself, more as a question to the night than to anyone else. The villain wasn't just hunting Camille anymore. He was toying with us, His games had only just begun, and the terror he spread was suffocating. He wasn't just after Camille's soul. He wanted to break us, to make us watch as she slipped away, lost to whatever hell he had come from. The desert was the perfect setting for his kind of torment. The endless expanse of sand and rock seemed to stretch forever, the night swallowing every trace of our movement, leaving us with nothing but the terror in our hearts. And now, it felt as though the ground itself was conspiring against us. We moved cautiously, stepping through the dry, brittle landscape, hoping to escape whatever nightmare we had found ourselves in. But with every step, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, wrapping around us like an unseen predator. Camille's hand gripped mine tightly, but I could feel her body shaking. She was afraid, and I couldn't blame her. I tried to reason, but every logical thought was drowned out by the sound of whispers that only we could hear. Words that weren't spoken, but pressed into our minds like a constant pressure. "You cannot escape," the whispers seemed to say. "He is already here." Suddenly, I heard the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps behind us. Cold dread washed over me as I turned to see the villain in the white suit emerging from the shadows. This time, there was no subtlety. He was here, and he was here for her. He moved toward us like a shadow in the night, his face still obscured by the brim of his hat. But his presence was undeniable. Every step he took seemed to drain the very light from the surrounding air. Camille flinched, but the villain didn't stop. He kept coming, as inevitable as the rising tide. "You can't hide from me," he said, his voice low and smooth, like velvet dipped in poison. His smile stretched wider, as if he knew something we didn't. "She's already mine." I stepped in front of Camille instinctively, my heart pounding in my chest. "Number, not today," I growled. The villain chuckled, his laugh unsettling and hollow. "It's not about today. It never was." His hand reached out, not to touch, but to claim. Camille's breath caught in her throat, and I turned to her. Her eyes were vacant, distant, and for a moment I thought I saw her already slipping away from me. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted, as if in a trance. She wasn't fighting it anymore. She was choosing it. "You can't stop it," the villain whispered, his voice a dark caress. "You'll only prolong her suffering." I shook my head, trying to reach her, trying to wake her from whatever nightmare she was trapped in. "Camille, fight it," I pleaded. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. She was lost, consumed by something far darker than I could comprehend. The villain took another step forward, and with it, the air around us seemed to freeze, growing colder, heavier. The ground beneath us began to crack, jagged lines splitting the desert floor as if the earth itself was being torn apart by his power. His hand reached for Camille's face, his fingers mere inches from her cheek. And then, something shifted. The air vibrated with a strange energy, and Camille's eyes flickered. For a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I knew, the woman I loved, fighting against the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't escape." I didn't know what to do. I could feel the pull of the villain's power trying to drag her away. 3. True Highway Horror Street, Ories. Oregon, the 3rd of November, 2023. Just after 9 p.m., the fog was heavy along a forested back road near Mount Hood, stretching miles away from any gas station or cell signal. That's when we saw him standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still. His face was bone white, his grin far too wide. There were 4 of us. Jenna, 23, smart, calm, and hard to rattle. I was driving. Noah. Behind me were Marcus Quiet, logical, and Dana, sharp-eyed and skeptical of everything. We had taken a shortcut off the highway after Dana suggested a quicker route through the mountain. It looked fine on the map. The figure wore a dirty brown shirt, his bald head shining under the headlights. Cracks lined his pale face, with deep red veins running through the gaps, like something trying to bleed but never allowed to. His eyes were black hollows, no whites, no blinking. I braked, Jenna whispered. "Keep driving." But the second I blinked, he was gone. Just trees again. The road narrowed as the fog thickened. The trees pressed in like they were listening. Dana muttered, "We'd passed the same twisted tree stump twice." Then the car stalled engine cut. Lights dimmed. Phones were dead. We had no choice but to walk. The woods swallowed us quickly. Our flashlights barely reached 10 feet. Then we started hearing it. A soft laugh. Faint, like a whisper too far away to place. It drifted, weaving between trunks. At first, it sounded almost playful. Then it deepened layered with something cold and wrong. We found a ranger's cabin. Old, caved in on one side, but enough shelter for the night. The inside smelled like mold and rot. We bolted the door and tried to sleep in shifts. That's when Jenna found Ita handprint on the inside of the dusty window. Fresh, red. Around 2 a.m., Dana screamed. She'd stepped outside to check a noise. We found her crouched by a tree, staring blankly. She kept whispering. He smiled. He told me to stay. From then on, none of us slept. Marcus heard breathing when he was alone. Jenna found her name scratched into a wallboard deep, carved like with a nail. I saw him again, behind a tree, closer this time, that same grin. Never moved. Just watched. The final night, he came inside. The temperature dropped. The cabin went silent. Jenna stood frozen in the hallway. He stood inches from her, smiling. She didn't scream, didn't run, just stared. Then he vanished like smoke. We fled into the dark. Branches slashed at us. The forest never ended. But as Jenna turned and shouted something none of us understood, the woods opened. The road returned. We never spoke about what she said. Back home we tried to move on, but Jenna wakes with red marks on her skin. Marcus avoids mirrors. Dana hears laughter in her apartment. I don't sleep. They call him the Pale Man. Locals say he waits for those who stray too far from the road, but he doesn't haunt the forest. He follows. Wyoming, the 5th of November, just past midnight. We reached an old roadside motel called Pine Hollow after hours of driving through the back roads. It looked empty, swallowed by forest on all sides. But room 6's light was already on, and in the window, a figure watched us face pale, eyes like black holes. Jenna wanted to keep driving. She hadn't spoken much since the cabin, but her instincts were sharper now. Dana insisted we needed rest. Marcus said we were being paranoid. I paid for 2 rooms. The manager never spoke, just handed over the keys without looking up. His skin was grayish, and the air in the office smelled like damp stone. The rooms were cold. No matter how high we turned the heat, the chill clung to our skin. Jenna chose to stay alone in room 5. I stayed with Marcus and Dana in 4. Around 2 a.m., we heard a knock. Slow, deliberate, not on our door, on hers. She didn't answer, but we heard her scream. We rushed over, kicked the door open. She was alone, frozen near the bathroom, hands trembling. The window was open, and the curtains fluttered, as if someone had just left. She didn't say what she saw, but on the mirror behind her, a message appeared as fog spread across the glass. She belongs here now. None of us slept after that. The next morning, Dana discovered footprints in the hallway. Bare feet, but only leading into our rooms. None led out. We tried to leave, but the road was gone. The trees had moved, folding over the highway like fingers closing around us. The motel stood behind us, unchanged, silent. That night, we heard humming, low and tuneless, echoing through the vents. Marcus pressed his ear to the wall and said it sounded like someone dragging their nails across concrete. Then the lights flickered. I found Dana in the parking lot, standing barefoot in the snow, her eyes wide, lips pale. She didn't feel the cold. She whispered about a man who stood by her bed, whispering her name in a voice that wasn't human. Said he showed her memories that weren't hers. Jenna became distant. She said the forest speaks, that it watches, and that the man from the road is not a man at all. She showed me her shoulder, where thin red lines had appeared overnight. Patterns, symbols, like they'd been etched into her skin. She wasn't scared, just resigned. That same night, we all saw him. He stood in the motel lobby. The same cracked white face. The grin stretched unnaturally. His brown shirt clung to him like it had never been dry. He looked at us, one by one, tilting his head. The room dimmed around him. Jenna stepped forward, as if pulled. He raised a hand toward her. I grabbed her and dragged her back. Marcus shouted. Dana collapsed, but he didn't chase. He just smiled and vanished through the wall like mist. The motel is a trap. We know that now. It doesn't want us dead. It wants us to stay. To forget the world outside. To lose time. The clock stopped working. The radio only plays static, except between 3 and 4 a.m., when a voice whispers names we don't recognize. Last night, the hallway stretched longer than before. The doors multiplied. Room 6 is always open now, and sometimes we see her. The girl in white, the one with the stitched mouth. She doesn't speak, but she watches, and every time we blink, she's closer. Jenna doesn't want to leave anymore. Says we belong here too. Marcus writes names on the walls, not ours. Others, people who never left. I still try to find the road, but the forest shifts each time. Dana no longer sleeps. Her eyes are dark. She flinches at shadows. The pale man isn't hunting us. He's welcoming us. Montana, the 8th of November, near dusk. The sun bled behind the mountains as our car rolled into what looked like an abandoned trailhead near the Stillwater River. Jenna said the road didn't exist on any map, but the pale man was always nearby. We could feel Etho the trees lean toward us, like listening. None of us had slept since the motel. Marcus's face was hollow. Dana rarely spoke. Jenna changed the most. She stopped asking to leave. Said she dreamed of roots, of cold soil pulling her in. I kept the car running, but the engine died on its own, 3 times. The path pulled us deeper. It was narrow, cut between trees older than memory. Bark looked burned. Air thickened, like breathing through soaked cloth. At the 5th mile, we found a burned-out ranger cabin. The door stood open. No one wanted to go in, but Jenna did. Inside, there were symbols carved into the walls, same as on her shoulder. The floorboards creaked with each step. We found a journal, pages melted by water and time, but one line stood out. He walks beneath the roots. He wears your voice. That night, we lit a fire by the river, not for warmth, just to keep the dark from swallowing us, but it didn't help. Around midnight, Dana pointed toward the woods, said someone was standing there. He was. The pale man, in the same brown shirt, same split face, grinning, watching. He didn't move, didn't blink. Jenna stood to face him, and the fire dimmed. I reached for her, but she stepped forward like in a trance. Marcus threw a rock at the figure. The pale man didn't flinch. Instead, Dana screamed. Her reflection in the water twisted, grinning back with black eyes. She fell to her knees, whispering something over and over. Don't remember me. Don't remember me. The trees groaned. Something cracked above us. A branch broke and nearly crushed Marcus. I pulled him back. When we looked again, the figure was gone, but Jenna had vanished too. We searched through the woods. Hours passed. The stars above never moved. No wind, no sound, just distant whispers, like chanting from underground. We found Jenna by the roots of a fallen tree, kneeling, eyes open but not seeing. She whispered. He showed me what comes next. Her voice wasn't hers. That night, we camped in silence. Every rustle in the trees made us freeze. The fire wouldn't stay lit. Marcus said we should leave, but we were already gone. The forest moved like it had swallowed the road. Time broke. Watches stopped ticking. The sky bled twilight. The pale man returned. Not walking. Gliding. He circled our fire, never touching the ground. His mouth moved, but the sound came from inside our own heads. He didn't speak in words, just feelings. Dread, hunger, longing. Dana stood, walked toward him, her body shaking, arms limp. He reached for her with fingers cracked like dry clay. I tackled her, screamed at Marcus to help, but the pale man turned his head, slowly, and Marcus collapsed. No scream, just silence, like something had taken the breath out of his lungs. We dragged him to the cabin. Inside, he breathed, barely, but his eyes were wrong, hollow. Jenna sat beside him, humming a tune we'd never heard before. By morning, her hands were stained with ash, and the symbols on the walls glowed faint red. The pale man wasn't chasing us. He was shaping us, turning us into echoes. The forest doesn't forget, it absorbs. Dana said she remembered other lives, other deaths, other groups. She found a photo buried beneath the hearth. 4 faces. One was Jenna's. But the picture was dated 1952. Now, Marcus speaks in riddles. Jenna draws symbols without looking. Dana refuses to leave the circle of stones she made. I stay awake. I still try to remember who I was before we took the wrong turn. But the forest is patient, and the pale man is always watching. Snow covered the ground in silence. The 1st of December, northern Michigan. The asylum ruins loomed in the mist, half swallowed by frost and trees. And in the highest window of the West Wing, someone was watching us. Or something. We weren't supposed to be there. The building had been condemned for decades. Locals avoided it, even in daylight. But Jenna said she saw a girl in her dreams. A girl trapped inside, whispering her name from the shadows. We tried to leave. The gate locked behind us. The air inside was thick with mildew and something worse. Decay, the kind that clings to skin. Dana found a door with scratch marks. Marcus counted 9 digits in the dust, dragged like someone had tried to claw their way out. I found the first message on the wall. Don't follow the crying. It's not her. Jenna said the girl's name was Elise. Said she remembered her now. Said Elise had drowned, but her body was never recovered. She thought the asylum was built over the lake where it happened. No one questioned her. We all felt it. Something old breathing beneath the floor. Then we heard the crying. It echoed down the main hallway, soft at first, but it grew louder, more human, until it was right next to us. No one was there. Lights flickered. The air dropped 10 degrees. Dana clutched her coat tight and stared down the hallway. At the end stood a man, tall, thin, wearing the remains of a patient's uniform. His face was pale, smooth, expressionless, but his eyes were not empty. They were full of rage, hunger, recognition. He moved toward us. We ran. The building twisted. Staircases changed. Doors vanished. Jenna screamed that Elise was calling for help. I pulled her away. Marcus kicked a hole in a boarded door, and we crawled into a dark chamber lined with hospital beds, straps still attached. The pale man followed. He didn't walk. He flickered. Every time we blinked, he was closer. When we turned, he stood behind us. When we ran, he was ahead. Dana begged us not to say his name. Said he could hear it, even inside our heads. We found another room. Old records, dust-covered tapes. We played one. It was Elise's voice. She talked about the man in the basement. Said he wasn't a doctor. Said he smiled when they screamed. That he didn't blink. That even after the asylum burned, he stayed, feeding. The door slammed. He was with us, again. This time, he grabbed Dana. Her body lifted into the air, limbs stretched like marionette strings. She screamed, but it came out backwards. We tried to pull her down. Her eyes turned white. Jenna shouted Elise's name. The lights shattered. When they came back, Dana was gone. The floor beneath her charred black. We never found a trace, but her voice still echoed in the halls. We ran to the upper levels. There we found Elise's room, locked. Inside, a girl sat on the floor, back turned to us, humming, the melody from Jenna's dream. When she turned around, she wore Dana's face, and the pale man stood behind her. He whispered in Jenna's ear. Her body froze. She said nothing but walked toward him. I tried to stop her. She looked at me with eyes that were no longer hers. He doesn't want her. He wants us to open the door. Marcus screamed that we had to burn the room, said it wasn't real, that none of this was. But when I struck the match, the pale man vanished. So did the girl, and the walls started bleeding. Not blood, water, cold, black, rising. We broke a window, jumped. Outside, time was wrong. Snow still fell, but the sky was dusk, not night. The asylum behind us looked whole again. No ruins. Lights flickering inside. Marcus doesn't speak now. Jenna disappeared that night. Walked into the woods without shoes or coat. Just vanished. The police said the asylum was torn down in 1983. But I know what I saw. Sometimes at night, I hear crying through the walls. Sometimes the mirror reflects someone behind me. Sometimes I wake up with my feet wet. The pale man is patient, and the door is still open.
This hospital is Haunted Horror Story, Montana, late October. Bitterroot Ridge lay quiet beneath the falling dusk, the old St. Mercy Medical Facility long abandoned. A cold wind swept through the pines, stirring the broken sign above the gate. But someone or something was already inside, crawling just beneath the cracked floors. The first to notice was Tessa Monroe, a 23-year-old wildlife photographer visiting the area for a documentary. Calm and intuitive, she had a sharp mind and a quiet resilience. She joined a research group led by Dr. Colin Barrett, a rational survival expert in his mid-30s, and Marla Reed, a tech specialist with a skeptical streak. They planned a short stay in the surrounding wilderness, but the storm forced them to seek shelter in the forgotten hospital. They hadn't been inside for more than an hour when the first sound came, a low, dragging noise, too steady to be the wind. Marla swore she saw movement in the dark hallway. Tessa stayed silent, eyes fixed on the hallway's far end. Something gray had shifted, something massive and not entirely human. The creature's appearance was unnatural. Thick with muscle, its skin a dull gray tone, rough and scarred. Its eyes glowed a muted red in the dim light. It didn't walk, it crawled, with bones that cracked as it moved, twisting across the tile like a wounded beast, yet fast. That night, while Colin explored the basement, the thing appeared again. It cornered Tessa near the collapsed west wing. Her back to the wall, flashlight flickering, she held her breath as the creature crept toward her. Its breath was heavy, its head tilted with strange curiosity. Just before it reached her, Colin emerged, his voice sharp, drawing it away. They ran. The group was shaken, but the danger had only just begun. Marla became obsessed. She believed the entity wasn't just haunting the hospital, it was feeding off something. The group found locked rooms, old patient logs, strange carvings in the floorboards. Someone had tried to contain it, or worship it. By the third night, isolation set in. The storm raged outside, the roads were blocked, they were trapped. The creature was no longer hiding, it stalked them. Slow, deliberate, they heard it scraping along walls, breathing behind locked doors, whispers from vents. Tessa was the calmest, but even she had nightmares. And one night, she woke to find her name written in ash across the floor. The most terrifying moment came when Marla vanished. No screams, no noise, just gone. In her place, a trail of wet footprints led into a sealed surgical room. Inside, they found no blood, no sign of a struggle, just her necklace placed neatly on the center table. They didn't speak after that. Fear had hollowed them. Tessa knew they had to leave, but the exits seemed to change. The maps were wrong, the stairwells looped back. Time moved oddly. Then the thing began to speak. Soft, broken whispers, calling their names from the shadows. At dawn, the storm cleared, but the air didn't feel right. Tessa stood by a cracked window, watching the pine trees sway. Behind her, the door creaked open. They never found Marla, and what followed them out wasn't human. Colin won't talk about the hospital anymore, but Tessa returns to Bitterroot every year, not to hunt or hike, to see if it's still watching. And every time, the woods are quieter. Too quiet. November. Bitterroot Ridge sat under a slate-gray sky, cold pressing down over the pines. St. Mercy Medical loomed in silence, its rusted frame barely holding against the wind. Inside, the thing was awake again, dragging itself through the dark, its breath echoing under the hollow floors. Tessa Monroe hadn't left Montana. Weeks had passed since the last night, yet something kept her tethered. She couldn't forget the whispering walls, the creature's eyes, or the way Marla had vanished without a trace. Dr. Colin Barrett returned with her, despite the risk. He brought someone new, Elise Tran, a botanist in her early 30s, practical, curious, and unnervingly calm. Also with them was Leon Grant, a former fire ranger with survival instincts and deep-set wariness. They weren't there to investigate anymore. They wanted answers. Something unnatural had been buried in the hospital's ruins, and it wasn't done with them. The moment they stepped inside, the temperature dropped. Elise felt it first, a sharp pressure behind her eyes. Leon found claw marks on the stairwell wall, deep grooves in the concrete, not rusted, but fresh. Colin's flashlight flickered even with full batteries. They pressed forward into the west wing, where the floor had collapsed weeks before. Tessa led them, her face pale but steady. The air smelled like rot. Faint sounds whispered between the walls, scratching, clicking, something dragging itself slowly just out of sight. Then they saw it. At the end of a long corridor, beneath a flickering light, the creature stood upright for a moment. Massive. Gray skin stretched tight over corded muscle. Its back arched unnaturally, and its jaw hung slightly open, red eyes fixed on them. When it dropped to all fours and disappeared behind the wall, no one moved. For a long second, they could only hear each other breathing. Later that night, Elise was the first to be cornered. She wandered off, trying to collect soil samples from the basement level. When Tessa and Leon found her, she was crouched in a tight corner, whispering that it had followed her through the vents. She described its voice, low, not quite human, repeating her name as it scraped its limbs across the ceiling. They brought her back, but she didn't sleep. She just stared at the hallway outside, eyes wide, hands trembling. The second encounter was worse. Leon stood guard near the old operating wing when the lights above him shut off one by one. A low growl rose from the far end, closer with every second. He aimed his flashlight, caught the creature mid-crawl, its limbs twisting, face inches from the ground, eyes glowing. It hissed low and ducked into a side wall before he could react. His scream brought everyone running, but there was no trace. Colin believed it was protecting something. He found symbols in the records room, spirals etched into the floor with what looked like bone fragments. Not decoration, containment. A place not meant to be opened. But the collapse weeks ago had broken the floor, and now it moved freely. Each night it came closer, the sound of breath outside their rooms, scratching at the doors. Tessa found claw marks on her bed frame, deep and recent. Elise began sleepwalking. Leon locked himself in, muttering that the thing was inside his dreams. By the fourth day, Elise vanished. They searched the halls, every corner. Then they heard her voice from the eastern stairwell, faint, pleading. Tessa ran first, despite Colin yelling behind her. At the bottom of the stairs, they found nothing but Elise's recorder, still running. Her last words were on loop. "It's behind me. It's hands, not hands." That night, the thing appeared in full. It tore through the metal grate above the hallway, crashing to the floor just feet from Colin. He froze, staring into its face. No emotion, no expression, only hunger. Tessa pulled him away just in time, the group diving into an old radiology room, barricading the door with a shelf. They heard it breathing on the other side. Slow, waiting. It didn't attack. It wanted them afraid. They realized it fed on more than fear. It twisted memory, reality, time. The hospital shifted around them. Corridors looped. Maps became useless. Leon vanished briefly and reappeared with a long scratch across his back, unable to explain where he'd been. In the final confrontation, Tessa chose to confront it. She returned to the collapsed West Wing alone, luring it out with her flashlight. It followed, crawling, closer. When Colin and Leon arrived, they found her standing face to face with the creature, her eyes locked with its, unmoving. It tilted its head as if curious. Then slowly, it retreated back into the dark. She collapsed moments later, alive, but silent. They left the next morning. The hospital was quiet again, but before they crossed the ridge, Leon looked back. The main entrance door stood open, just slightly. They never found Elise. Tessa doesn't speak of what she saw in the last moments, but sometimes when the wind moves through the trees, she swears she hears her name again. not whispered, remembered. Wyoming border, mid-November. Wind screamed through the mountain pass as dusk fell over the woods. At the base of a cliff buried by years of snow and moss, the lower annex of St. Mercy's revealed itself, half swallowed by earth and not on any map. Something crawled just beyond the broken concrete wall, breathing low, waiting. Tessa Monroe returned again, against reason. She wasn't alone. Colin Barrett, drained but determined, came back with her. And Leon Grant, more silent than before, still bore the long scar across his back. A new face joined them, Dr. Rowan Hale, a geologist in her early 40s, skeptical of anything she couldn't measure. She was hired to examine the sinkhole near the hospital's ruins, but they hadn't told her what lived beneath. They entered through the collapsed basement tunnel. The air turned heavy with mold and dust. Lights flickered, tools malfunctioned. Rowan grew uneasy, claiming her compass spun without stop. Leon noticed it first. Scratches along the walls, too wide to be made by a man. Then came the sound again, a slow drag, like something pulling itself by the elbows, inch by inch. They weren't alone. The creature showed itself that night. Tessa stood near the surgical records room, the others steps behind when it slid from the ceiling vent above. It dropped to the ground with a dull thud, muscular, hunched, gray skin pulling tight across twisted limbs. Red eyes stared, unblinking. Then it lunged. They scattered. The thing slammed into a wall, crawling after Tessa as she ducked behind overturned cabinets. Colin shouted to draw it away. Rowan froze, paralyzed by what she saw. It wasn't just a monster. Its chest bore deep scars, symbols burned into the skin, remnants of something older than the hospital, something summoned. They regrouped in a reinforced hallway. Leon blocked the door with rusted filing cabinets. Rowan asked what that thing was. Colin told her the truth. It wasn't human. It never was. He believed it was part of the land before the hospital was built, sealed beneath it long ago. A mistake had reopened it, and now it wanted out. That night, it came for them again. Tessa awoke to whispers echoing through the vent above her cot. Her name, drawn out in a voice that wasn't quite human. She grabbed her flashlight and crept toward the hallway. The others were already there, staring at the far end. Something moved inside the walls. The drywall flexed outward, pushed by something crawling too close to the surface. Then Rowan screamed. Her gear had been ripped apart. On the far side of the room, she stood backed against a shattered shelf. The creature crouched in front of her, head low, arms outstretched like it was studying her. Not attacking, watching. Tessa reached her, dragging her away as the others threw debris to slow it. It didn't chase. It slithered backward into the darkness, red eyes fixed on them the entire time. The pressure mounted. Food supplies were missing, equipment stopped working, water ran dark. Rowan began to change. She spoke in fragments, claimed to hear voices through the stone, that the thing whispered truths, promised release. Colin didn't trust her. Leon wanted to leave, but the tunnel behind them had collapsed. No exit, no signal, just the endless hum of the creature's breath vibrating through metal. 3 days in, they discovered a locked room near the old morgue. Inside were dozens of patient photographs, faces scratched out, and one newer image. It was of Tessa, taken just weeks ago, placed neatly in the center of the board. They argued, tensions broke. Rowan lashed out, claiming they had brought the danger by disturbing the earth. Tessa believed the creature was choosing, watching who would survive. That night, Rowan vanished. No sound, no trail, just a smear of dust near the stairwell and her journal left open. The final entry read, "I think it understands me. I think it remembers me." The final confrontation happened in the underground corridor near the boiler system. Tessa led the way, flashlight barely holding. The air trembled. The creature dropped from the pipes ahead, its limbs cracked, chest heaving. It didn't rush. It blocked the path, breathing slowly, hands spread. Colin stood his ground. He spoke calmly, almost to himself, telling it they knew what it was now. That fear wouldn't feed it forever. Tessa held out Rowan's journal. The creature tilted its head. For a moment, no one moved. Then it screamed, a long, raw sound that tore through the hallway. Lights burst. Concrete cracked. The group ran, barely escaping through a secondary access shaft Leon had found earlier. As they climbed toward the light, they heard the thing below. Not chasing,